I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. Tom, I'm going to have you introduce our guest and kick this off.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey Scott, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for letting me be on your show and get my experiences out on here.
Yeah, well, you and I talked the other day, and you had some really interesting experiences. One of them, I believe, was in the UP, Michigan UP.
No, it was in a town called Mayville, and it was actually in the thumb of Michigan. It wasn't up in the UP. I'd never hunted up in the UP. I had several chances to go up there, but I heard the deer hunting up there sucks. So I'm a big deer hunter, so I'm a big buck hunter, buck killer. So I like to go where there's great big bucks, like Ohio, here in Indiana where I live. There's not a lot of big bucks up in Michigan actually, but up in the UP they're kind of scarce, and a lot of deer up there. They have a lot of harsh winters, so a lot of them don't make it. Their rack size isn't very big because of the nutrition, because there isn't really any up there on what they eat. So I just mainly hunted around my house and then over by Mayville on a friend of mine's property.
Tell us about that first encounter that you had. That was pretty interesting.
Well, it was in November, and I can't remember the exact day because it was, 21 years ago. But I know it was during the time when there was no moon phase. All the moon phase was out, so it was completely dark out. There was no moon shining in the woods or anything I was hunting, and it kind of set this up. The woods I was hunting was, I don't know how many acres it was, but it went for about 6 or 7 miles. So it was a pretty big chunk of land, but I only hunted about 250 acres of it, because that's all the landowner, that's all he owned of it. And I was the only person who was allowed to bow hunt it. Nobody else was allowed to be back in there. Then he owned property across the road as well. And his cousin hunted over there. I didn't hunt over on that side. I just stayed over by myself. And so anyways, it was about an hour, as the crow flies, about an hour, 45 minutes from my house. So I would have to get up pretty early to get over there, because I always like getting in the woods in the dark. If you guys have deer hunted, the best time is to get in there and get situated before first light, because a lot of bucks come back to their bedding areas, and that's the best key time to, pop one of them and get one of them. So I got to the landowner's property really early in the morning. It was pitch dark out. He had one light for the property. I always parked over by it so I could kind of see what I was doing. Are we still good?
Yeah, we're good.
We are 100%.
Okay. So I got to the property. I got out of my car. When I got out of my car, I had to go over on the other side to get all my gear out, my bow and everything. And I really noticed that it was really super quiet. I mean, now I've hunted out in the woods before and it's been, quiet, but not like this. This was like, you could hear the ringing in your ears, it was like really eerie. And I'd never experienced that before, ever in my life. Last year was 30 years for me being in the woods hunting. So I've done this for quite a long time. I've hunted all over Ohio, Wayne National Forest, and the southernmost part of Ohio. Here in Indiana, I hunt a couple properties, and then Michigan. So I've been hunting a lot of areas for quite a long time. So when I got there, it was like really, really quiet, and I couldn't get past that. Like I'd never experienced that. But I thought, oh well, Bigfoot wasn't on my mind back then. You know what I mean? I remember growing up watching Leonard Nimoy in search of with a lot of other people. I remember seeing the Patty video and thinking, well, that could be real. I've always had an open mind to life. I mean, this is a big world. I mean, anything can happen. And I remember seeing that and thinking, well, that could be real, but that's out on the West Coast. That's out in British Columbia. That's out in Alaska. I mean, it's not Michigan. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know anything about the subject really, other than seeing that video. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I think I told Tom when we talked, I think internet at the time was dial-up and it was real slow. And, it wasn't like I was researching Bigfoot online or anything. You know what I mean? I've hunted a long time. I've found tree breaks, a lot of tree breaks, hunting the different areas I've hunted. I've ran across them, but at the time, I didn't know what they were really, because like I said, I wasn't really into Bigfoot. I wasn't researching it. I can remember being in the 7th grade and getting a book on the Loch Ness Monster, on Sasquatch, and a bunch of other things. And I remember seeing a tree, I think it's in Alaska, that was tore out of the ground and the root and everything and was shoved in the ground. And there's a famous picture of it. So that's all I really knew about Bigfoot. So when I got this property, I got out, was kind of eerie quiet. I'm like, well, I guess this is just how it is. So I'm going to start down my way into the woods. So the landowner, he lived about 50 foot above the bottom of the woods. So you would have to walk down this 2-track and it would circle around behind his property and then eventually go in the woods. And then when I got in the woods, I had to turn again to the right and I was facing south. So I would go down that 2-track and then it would stop and then it would turn left. And it would run, I don't know, 2-3 miles back in the woods. You could drive a 4-wheeler or whatever. You could drive east through the woods for a pretty good chunk of area. So I would take a left and I would walk about 7, 8, 9 steps. And then there was a game trail that butted into the 2-track. And that game trail is what I would turn right. Now I'm facing south again. And I would take that on back to my stand, I don't know, 150, 200 yards back in there. And I hunted what you call a bull. We call them ridges here, but people out west call them bulls. But I was kind of like in the middle of the bull. And then behind my tree, it went up to a ridge about 25 feet high. So I was 20 feet up in the stand, but it's 25 feet. So I can see to the top of the ridge, but I can't see over the other side. And I'll get to that here in a second too. So I started down that game trail and I took, I don't know, 12 or 14, 15 steps. And, I got a flashlight on my thigh, which I always do when I walk in the woods in the dark. So I can roll it left or right and I can see the floor of the woods or the forest, whatever I'm in. So I don't trip over something and fall on my keister. So, but I stepped on that twig and it made a cracking noise. And when I did, something to my right about 25 yards or so got up. And when it got up, it made so much noise getting up because there was a lot of leaves on the floor. There was a lot of foliage on the floor. So it was hard to get back in the woods and be quiet when you're walking. You know what I mean? You'd have to walk a little bit, stop, walk a little bit, stop. So, you didn't spook any deer because I've bumped deer in the dark before. And when they pop up and they go busting down through the woods, they'll stop. And when they find out that you're a predator, they start blowing and snorting all over the place. This thing got up, again, made a bunch of noise, and I froze, and I was bent over. Now, I'm sitting there as it got up, and I'm bent over, and my mind's telling me, Scott, stand up, straighten up. And I couldn't straighten up. I was just froze because this thing took 5 steps to my right and went in behind me and stopped. So now it's on the game trail about 17 steps from me, and it just stops and it's standing there. And I can't see it. I can't see my hand in front of my face without pulling the flashlight up. And I'm like, do I shine my flashlight behind me and see what the heck it is? Or do I just stand here? I didn't really know what to do, but it just was, the thing of it is when it walked like me. That's the characteristic that I couldn't wrap my mind around, because it's like, is there somebody else in the woods here that I don't know about? I'm the only person allowed to hunt here. So I heard it walk, but every time it took a step, it was cracking everything like it had great big feet. So it went in behind me and it was standing, and I'm standing there, and it seemed like it was 5 minutes. It probably was a minute. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start walking to my stand, because I got to get to my stand, because this is kind of creeping me out. So when I would start to walk, it would start to walk. Now it's going east. I'm going south. So I would take 4 steps, I would stop, and it would take one more step. Like, it didn't know when I was going to stop. But the crazy thing was, it was trying to be stealthy and quiet. It was trying to move when I moved, so I couldn't really hear what it was doing over what I was doing, because it was so noisy. But I could hear it cracking and popping sticks everywhere it walked. So I did it again. I took 5 steps, stopped. It took one more step. And then I would stand there, and it would stand there. Now, there was no noise from it. There was no huffing or growling, or there was no infrasound. There was no telepathic thing in my head. I've heard other people talk about that. It was just standing there really quiet. So I did it one more time, and I stopped, and it took one more step. Now I'm sitting there in the dark, pitch black. I can't see. All I hear is this thing over to my left. And the hair started to stand up on the back of my neck, and I started to get goosebumps, just like I'm getting right now, because every time I tell this, it's like I'm right back there again. And so I'm like, screw this. I'm going to run the rest of the way up over the ridge to my stand. I'm getting out of here. So I took off running. And when I took off running, it took off running. And the thumping noise it made every time, the footfall of it, it was so loud. It was just a big thump every time it took a step. And there was 5 or 6 seconds in between each step. So I knew it was taking big strides. So I'm like, what the hell is this thing, man? Never had Bigfoot in my head, anything like that. But I got down to my stand, and it was still running. And I dropped my flashlight a couple of times. I picked it up. I'm scrambling to get my bow hooked up. I climb up in my tree. By now, it's starting to slow down, and it's in the swamp. And I got up in my tree, hooked my safety harness on, and I just sat there and listened. I'm listening to it walk in the swamp, and it's breaking trees, and like it's pushing trees over and branches and walking through this stuff, because it's thick in the swamp. I've actually been in there, but it goes out away from me, probably, I don't know, 80 to 100 yards. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening, and all of a sudden it stops. And I'm like, what the heck? What the heck was that? Then all of a sudden I hear crack, crack, pop, pop, crack, pop. It starts breaking these limbs off this tree. And I know they got to be big limbs, because it sounds like a stick of dynamite going off when it's doing it. And you can hear it. You can hear it cracking the tree limb and twisting it. And I'm like, got my face in my hands going, is this really happening to me? Am I really hearing this? Is this really going on? And I'm thinking, you got to have hands to do that. And there's nothing in here that has hands. I'm the biggest predator in here. I weigh 213 pounds. I'm about 5'8" and a half. You got deer in there, 140, 160 pounds, maybe 180. You might get a big old wily buck that maybe is over 200, but I'm pretty much the biggest predator. I mean, I don't have elk. I don't have Kodiak bear or grizzlies. I don't have moose. I don't have caribou. I have nothing in there that weighs over 500 pounds. And this damn thing sounded like it was 600 to 1,000 pounds. When it started running, man, I was like, it blew my mind. Because first it was fast and agile, but I could hear it taking big strides. The thumps were so paused out, so many seconds in between each one, that I was like, it blew my mind. And when it started breaking the trees, I just kept saying to God, please don't let this thing come back. Please, because I was scared to death it was going to come back. In fact, when I was standing on the game trail and it was standing right behind me in pitch black, I thought, I'm going to die right here. This thing's going to come down this game trail. it is going to sweep me up and it's going to carry me out of here, or it's going to tear my head off or whatever, because it sounds huge. And so I usually got down out of my tree about 9:30 if I didn't see anything. I sit up there till 11:30 because I was scared to death. I've been scared before, but I was like frightened in this whole thing. And I mean frightened. So I've never felt that before. So I got down, I got all my gear together, got my bow. I went up over that ridge. I went down that game trail. I got to that 2-track, up the 50-foot. I got to my car. I threw my stuff on my car, and I didn't even talk to the landowner. I got out of there and went home. And I was scared to death. And you know, I didn't go back there for about a month and a couple weeks. I was married at the time, and my ex kept asking me, "Why aren't you going hunting? Why aren't you going over to Mayville? How come you're not hunting beyond the house?" And I had to think of an excuse because I was terrified. And that's basically what happened to me in Michigan.
Scott, let me ask you this real quick. You run from this thing, you know, you can tell it's a huge creature. You get up in your tree stand. What happened then? Did you hear anything else? Was there any more sound?
No, I heard it walk out away from me. It was going like southeast from what I could gather in the dark. And then I heard it break. I mean, I wish I could have recorded it breaking the tree. It was tearing this tree apart. And I'm not kidding you. I mean, tearing it apart. It was so loud. And this is when I realized this thing's really powerful because it's ripping limbs off a tree. Okay. And it's like, then after it did that, I heard it take a few more steps, and then I couldn't hear it no more. And then I waited for daylight. I didn't see any deer or anything. And then I got down and I made my way the hell out of there. And I told a friend of mine years later, because I didn't tell anybody about this for 3 years. I didn't want anybody to think I was nuts and crazy. It's the same thing everybody says, but when you're in the moment and you have that happen, you don't want anybody to think you've lost it. And when you tell somebody this, they're rolling their eyes or they're smiling or laughing, or, you know, Bigfoot's a big joke and we got messing with Bigfoot and Slim Jim commercials and all that stuff. And I think it's more in this country of a joke, except for the people that go through this kind of stuff, because it's no joke. Because I know what I heard in that woods. I couldn't see it, but I never knew they slept on the ground. Years later, Melba Ketchum's got video of one sleeping on the ground. I don't know if it's really real. I wasn't there, but I saw the video. I didn't even know they slept on the ground. You know, I didn't know if they were real, you know, where they slept, if they were in caves underground. You know, I knew nothing about it. Like I said, when I was going out to deer hunt, I was going out to deer hunt, not to do anything else. But I went home and I was there for a month and a couple weeks. And I remember I couldn't sleep one night, and I got up and went out in my living room, and I just sat there and I was like, you know, you got to get back over there, Scott. You got to get back over there and get in there and face this, because otherwise you're going to sell all your stuff. You're going to quit hunting. And I have a real passion for this. I look forward to it every year. I have a couple friends in Ohio I hunt with and I went to high school with, and there's a lot of camaraderie along with it. And plus I'm pretty good at it. So I just said, I got to go back over there, and I got to get in there, and I have to just face this. So I got back in there, but I would never go back in the dark. I'd go in at first light, and when it was starting to get dark, I would say, okay, this is my cue. I'm getting out of here. So I hunted in there for 3 more years. I hunted in there till 2003. Excuse me. I'll tell you, I would get in there. I would get up my tree. I'd hook everything up, sit down, get ready. I probably missed a lot of deer by doing this, because I was too afraid to go in the dark, because this really rattled me. And I've never been like this before in my life, ever before this. I always went in the woods in the dark, and I was excited. And so it kind of really rattled me. So I would get in there, get up in my stand. I'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden I'd hear a tree knock way out to the south of me. And I mean, it sounded like it was hitting a tree, and the whatever it was hitting it with would explode. I mean, it was really loud. And then, 10 minutes later, I'd hear a big tree knock to the north. And it's like about every time I go in there, I would hear it. And it would always just be one knock. Well, I listened to some other people that have been field researchers, and they said in their podcast that sometimes Sasquatch they'll do however many people are in the woods that they know or sense or whatever, they'll do that many knocks on a tree to let the other one know how many people are in it. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it would always be one knock with me. And then, I would hear a whoop every once in a while in the swamp, and I would be like, did I just hear a whoop? I thought I heard a whoop. And I would be real quiet and listen, and then I wouldn't hear nothing. And then the really creepy thing is over the ridge behind me, I would hear whistling. My girlfriend is a bird nut, so I kind of imitated the bird or the whistle I heard, and she's like, oh, that's that kind of bird. I said, no, you don't understand. This was like something with big lungs, and it was louder than what a bird would do it. Like when birds whistle, you can hear, but it's kind of faint. This was like real strong, like a bad human trying to do it or whatever. But it would. I'll see if I can do it. It was like. I can't do it. And that's what I would hear over the ridge. And I would hear it to the right of me, and then I would hear it to the left of me. And then I would hear it to the right, and I would hear it to the left. I would never hear it in the middle. It was always far to the right or far to the left.
Let me interrupt you for just a second. Hey, Will,
Sure.
Is this anything that you've ever heard before or experienced?
Actually, I had another witness that imitated that and sounded exactly the same.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you something. Like who's over the ridge whistling? I've never seen anybody in here. I'm the only person allowed to hunt it. But I would hear that, every couple times I was out there, I would hear it. And I couldn't see over the ridge. I thought a couple times about going up the ridge, going up the ridge to the top to see if I could see what it was. But then, after this whole thing in the dark, it was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But it would be so loud that I would get up in my stand and turn around and face the ridge, and I would look around the tree because I'd be hearing it. And I'm like, I cannot see this. It's driving me crazy. But, things like that went on. When they were there, I think it was more than one. I think it was 2 or 3. But when they were there, the weird thing is there were no birds, there were no squirrels, there were no coyote, no raccoon, no turkeys. There was turkeys all over the property. I mean, you couldn't walk in the woods without a turkey that was roosting up the tree fly out. And I don't know if you've ever heard a turkey take off from a tree. It's loud because they got big wings, and that will make your heart jump out of your chest in the dark. Yeah, I would hear this, and I very seldom ever saw a deer. If I'd hear them tree knocks, I was screwed for the day. I mean, I knew it, like, I'm not going to see anything. They're here. And it's really weird because in 2002, I shot an 8-point buck. He came in, and up in Michigan, you could bait. So I had a bait pile. I was right almost over the top of it, and I had a buck come in. I didn't hear him that day, but I had a deer come in. I shot him, and he ran out to the north. So I waited, like maybe 45 minutes. I thought I got a pretty good hit on him. So I got down. I found my arrow was broken in half, and I started trailing the blood. And I walked down through here, and I'm going north, just on the outside of the swamp. Because the swamp was like real thick, and then it would open up into like an opening where it was kind of clear. I remember looking up, and I saw a tree break. And the tree break was, I couldn't reach it. It was probably, I would say 7 foot up in the air, and the top of the tree was broke over. And I'm like, God, I've seen this before. Hunting all these years, I've seen this exactly. You know, this must be something that they do. Because at that time, like I said, 2003, I wasn't online looking for Bigfoot, whatever. I was just trying to get past it in my head and get past the fear of it, which I still think to this day I have PTSD. Now, I've not had any nightmares about Sasquatch. I go back in the woods in the dark now, and it's like, I got to really push myself to go in. When I go to Ohio and hunt with my buddies and we all separate to go where we're going to sit in the woods, I got to really push myself because it's in the back of my mind all the time. I hear the footsteps. I hear it running. You know what I mean? So it's always on me. But I don't want to get off course here. But I found a tree break, and then I'm trailing the blood, and I go about another 70 yards, and I look over, and there's another tree break. And then I go about another, I don't know, 60, 75 yards, and there's another one. And now I'm to the fire lane or the fire road, and this deer has went across the fire road, and I didn't have the okay to go across there to go into that. So I had to get permission. So then it was getting later in the evening, and it's like, okay, I got to go in here and try and find this deer. So I'm going in there, and there were tree saplings that were broke and twisted and broken off and just hanging. And then I found another tree break. And then the weird thing is I could see a big pile of blood where the deer had laid down. And I knew this deer was dead because he bled out. And I was using big broadheads at the time. And I got him right behind his shoulder, but he was kind of angling a little bit towards me. But I know if anything, I got a liver shot, and I knew this deer was dead. I never found the deer. There was a couple more drops and then nothing. And I went for 100 yards in circles all around where I found that less blood, and I couldn't find the deer. It was like it just disappeared. It was gone. The other time I had a deer come in, I shot a 7-point, and it ran into the swamp. And I'm like, oh, Lord God, I got to go in that swamp and get that deer. And this was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I sat there till about 2:30. I got down, I walked back in there. You had to crawl through some of these places because it was so thick. And there was blood up on the trees. And I'm like, oh, that looks like a heart shot. This deer's dead. So I walked back there. I find the deer. It's kind of got its rack into some tree limbs. It passed away like that. So when I get to the deer, I'm like, well, I got to get this deer out of here. So I would walk up in the swamp about 20 yards. I'd set my bow down. Then I would go back and grab the buck by the rack, and I would drag it up to my bow, and so on and so on and so on. Well, as I'm doing this, I start hearing a whoop. I start hearing a whoop over here. I start hearing a whoop behind me. And I'm like, oh my God, they're in here somewhere, and I can't see them. So I started to panic a little bit. So I took that deer and I drug that deer through the swamp, and I got him up to the base of my tree. And I've never done this in all the years I've hunted. I was so freaked out that I left that deer under that stand. And I was like, you know what? If you guys want this deer, you can have it. I'm getting the hell out of here. And I got all my gear and I left that deer. I didn't even tag it. Now, I could get in a lot of trouble for that, but I went home. And when I was home that night, I called a buddy of mine and I said, CJ, I said, I shot this deer and I said, I really want to go in and get it. And I was wondering if you'd help me drag it out. I didn't really need him to help me drag it out because at the time I was in my 30s. I could drag a deer out, but I wanted him there for comfort if anything happened. So he didn't really know what he was getting into, but he's like, yeah, I got my van. We'll put some plastic down. We'll go over and get it. So the next day we went over there in the afternoon and we got down to it. And I really thought the deer was going to be ripped in half or the hindquarters were going to be gone because I've heard other guys say that's what's happened to them out in the Midwest. I get up over that ridge and there's my deer laying there and it hasn't been touched. So I'm thinking, oh, awesome. I'm going to get this deer and I'm going to get it field dressed and we're going to get the hell out of here. So he helped me drag it up over the ridge. We got down the trail a little way that I walk in on. And I said, okay, CJ, now I'm going to field dress this deer and I want you to do something for me. He's like, sure, what? And I said, I want you to look in 180-degree radius to 360. And he goes, what? I said, I want you to look around in like a 360. Just look around while I'm gutting this out. I don't want any coyotes coming in. You know, I tried to think of an excuse, you know what I mean? So I field dressed that deer the fastest I've ever field dressed a deer. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I was in, had the inners out, and I'm like, let's go. And we drug that deer up to that 2-track, and we drug it all the way up to his van. We threw it in his van. We got in his van, and we left. And I was like, it was like a big sigh of relief for me. And this is what I was going through, you know, up till 2003. The last time I hunted there in 2003, it was, I'm going to say it was December because it was pretty cold. And I'd sit up there, you know, all I could sit. And, it, you know, when the sun starts going down, you got this pink sky and it's, you know, it's my cue. Okay, I got to get down and get out of here. So it wasn't real dark in the woods, but it's kind of like, you know, you can only see maybe 100 feet around you, maybe 150 feet. And then you got to use a flashlight. And I had a pretty powerful, small little flashlight. And I got all my gear. And this is the thing out of all this that really freaked me out. I get all my gear. I go up over the smallest part of the ridge. I'm walking down the game trail. And there were pine trees and pine needles all over this property. Okay. So in some spots it was quiet. I get down the game trail, you know, 15, 16 steps, and a rock hits me in the back. Right in my left shoulder, hit me in my back. And it fell down on my left-hand side, and I popped my flashlight on, and I looked at it. And I'm like, wow, that's like a little rock. I'm like, that hit me in the back. And I was right next to a pine tree. And they always say, you should never look up. I was so scared to look up into that pine tree because I didn't know if one of these things was up in the pine tree. I don't know. But I did. I turned my flashlight on and I looked up there and I saw nothing. It was a big sigh of relief. So then I start walking again. I walk about another 10 steps. Another rock hits me in the back. I have it today. I have it right here. I could have showed you it if we were on the video part, but it hits me in the shoulder blade and almost hit me in the same spot. And I stop and I like take my flashlight and I go real slow. And I turn around and I go in a 360 and I'm looking for eye shine. I'm looking for something, you know, something to show itself because, okay, you know, you can do all this whooping and whistling and tree knocks, but now you're throwing rocks at me and you're hitting me. And now, you know, you've broke my space of comfortability. And this is really freaking me out because I'm actually having something throw a rock at me and I can't see it. And I'm going back and forth really slow and there's nothing there. Like I didn't see anything, nothing. And I'm really diligent and I'm real slow and I'm really looking because I'm saying to myself, if something peeks out around a tree, I'm out of here. I'm going to drop everything. And I don't care if I leave it here and never come back. I'm getting the hell out of here. But there was nothing. So I bent down and I picked the stone up. It's about the size of a stone, I guess. So I go walking on down the trail. I get to the 2-track. And I said in my mind, this is what I said. Okay, guys, you can have this place. I'm going home and I'm never going to return here. I'm never coming back. You can have all of it. I'm out of here. And I got on that 2-track and I had nothing else happen. Nothing. I went up that 2-track. I threw my stuff in my car. I didn't say goodbye to the landowner. Nothing. And the landowner and I were, you know, we were pretty good friends, him and his wife. They were nice people. And I got in my car and I got the hell down the road and I got the hell out of there and I've never went back.
Hey, Scott, have you ever talked to the landowner since this episode?
No. Nope. No, I never called them. I sent them a Christmas card once thanking them for letting me hunt there. But I never went back or called them or asked them if they'd ever seen anything or heard anything. I wanted nothing to do with it, because by that time, I mean, when them stones got thrown at me, that was it for me. That was it. I was done. You know, I'm because I think they're very inquisitive. I think that the reason why they throw rocks, or they throw rocks in water or whatever, I think it's part intimidation, but I think it's part inquisitive. I think they want to see what our reaction is to it. They want to see the reaction on our face. You know, I mean, they might be clowning around, because most of the people I've heard that have had rocks thrown at the house or on the roof or towards their direction, it's always 3 foot away. And these aren't big rocks. It's just a little stone. It hit me twice. So I don't know if they were getting ready to show themselves to me and they were trying to get close to me to maybe not freak me out, if maybe the following year I was going to actually see one, because, you know, now I'm in there 3 years. I know they've seen me shoot deer. I know they've seen me harvest deer. You know what I mean? But it was just really weird. Really, really, really weird. I've never had anything like, and I've been out a lot, and, you know, I've never had anything throw anything at me. You have to have hands to do that. You know, a deer isn't going to do that. A raccoon, a coyote, you know, those animals are the ones that are in there that I know of. And you have to have hands to do that. So it freaked me out. Definitely.
I was going to say, yeah, when they mean business when the rocks get bigger. I talked to a guy here in Oregon almost 2 years ago who had some large grapefruit sized rocks thrown at him and his dog. And,
wow.
And that's serious stuff. Yeah, but even little ones, no thanks.
Well, I heard that they don't like dogs. I don't know if they have a fear of them or if they just don't trust them. I don't know. But I never had anything like this happen to me. I mean, the whole thing in the dark was scary enough. That was terrifying. But when I'm gonna go home and things are in my mind about what I got to do when I get home and a rock hits me in the back, and then I'm looked down and I see it, and then, you know, or a stone, I guess I should say. And then I walk, you know, some more steps and I get hit almost in the same spot. And this one's thrown a little harder. It kind of stung a little bit. So I don't know if I was farther away from them. I don't know, but it just freaked me out. And I was working at a hospital at the time, and I had a Native American friend, and he worked there also. And we worked in security. So we would have to work 2 weekends out of the month, and we'd have 2 weekends off. So we usually worked together. So I was sitting there talking to him one day, and because he's Native American, I thought, okay, I'm going to pitch this at you, and I want to see what you think. So I told him pretty much all of it, but I didn't tell him it was me, because I didn't want him to think, you know, maybe he doesn't believe in Sasquatch, even though he's a Native American. Maybe he thinks the whole subject is stupid or whatever. So I told him it happened to someone else. And when I told him about the stone or the rock hitting, and I said, you know, he picked the stone up. He's like, whoa, wait a minute. Back the bus up. He picked the stone up? And I said, yeah, he picked the stone up and took it with him. I think he has it today. He said, oh, no. He said, you don't do that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, my people or my tribe believes that if you touch anything that a Sasquatch touches, it connects you to them supernaturally or spiritually, because they're people and they have spirits. And I'm like, really? And I'm thinking to myself, oh, Lord God, you got to be kidding me. Because who am I to say to him, oh, I don't believe that. Your people are crazy. You know, who am I to say that? I don't know. I don't know anything about this subject. I'm not a field researcher. I'm a deer hunter, and I love deer hunting. Am I going out looking for these things? Nope. Am I gifting them? Nope. Am I trying to find one? Nope. I just want to deer hunt and be left alone. I've never heard any kind of rock clapping, or I don't know what they call it, clacking, or I've never heard that. Or I heard some of them do something with their mouth and it sounds like a tree knock. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, now I know a lot about the subject, because years later, after my second experience happened with one, I really started digging deep into it because I had something that happened to me in Indiana over here on my girlfriend's mom and dad's property, and it was scary too.
Okay, yeah, let's hear about that.
Okay, well, her mom and dad live about an hour from us. So 2015, I was hunting over there, and it was during rut, and I saw some deer, and I was at the far end of the woods. So their woods is east and west, okay? The length of the woods is east and west, and then the thickness of the woods is north and south. That gives you any kind of bearings. And there's stands all over this property, and they got about a 350 yard open field, okay? I found a couple tree breaks in there after this. Actually, last year I found a couple, but I'll get to that in a second. But I was sitting at the very far east part of the woods in the corner, and I was sitting up on the outside of the woods on the very corner on a tree. And I saw some deer, but I didn't get a shot or anything. And the sun was starting to go down, and, you know, you got a pink sky again. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm spending the night here. So, you know, there's always tomorrow. It's almost kind of getting too dark. I'm going to get down, get my gear, and I'm going to get to the house. Now, the house was, from where I was sitting, the house sits at the west end of the property, and it's probably, I don't know, it's probably 300 and some yards across, and it's probably 150 yards long. So I had about 150 yards to the front of the yard to the house that butts up against the field. So I get, you know, on my gear, I climb down, and I go out about 50 yards from the edge of the woods out into the field, and it's a bean field. So they hadn't been harvested yet, and there's beans everywhere. So I go out in this field, and I take a right, and I'm starting to walk down towards the house. And if you guys have hunted or anything, when you're in the woods, light escapes the woods. So it's darker on the inside than it is on the outside. So when you get, you know, when you get out of the woods, it gets light again, you know, because the sun's still up. So I'm walking down that field, and all of a sudden to the right of me, in the back corner of the woods is probably, I don't know, 35, 40 acres thick from north to south. So I hear from the corner of the woods something walking towards me bipedal, like a man or something. But it sounded like it had a heavy footfall to it. It sounded big. And I stopped in the field, and I'm looking over to my right because I'm waiting for somebody to pop out of the woods. Nobody's popping out of the woods because I was going to tell them, hey, you got to get off here. You know, you don't have any okay to hunt here. So this thing's coming at me in the woods, and all of a sudden it stops. And I'm flashing back to 2000 because it sounds just like what I heard in 2000 when it was walking around behind me. And it stops inside the woods. Now I'm really squinting because I'm trying to see on the inside of the woods because I can't see. It's now dark in the woods, and it's getting dark outside. And all of a sudden it lets out this scream. And I mean, it lets out a scream. I mean, a loud scream. I didn't even think. I just reflexed, and I went down on one leg in the bean field. For some reason, I wanted to get as low as I could. I didn't want this thing trying to see me or whatever it is. And the beans are like up where my eyes are. And I'm like sitting down, like on one knee going, what the hell is this, man? It just let out this big, huge scream. I've never heard this before. Then, you know, it seemed like 2 or 3 minutes. It's probably a minute. It let out not a roar, not like a lion or anything. It let out this huge howl. I mean, really loud. It was so loud that I had to cup my hands to my ears because it was hurting my ears because I was only 75 yards away from it. And I dropped my bow and cut my ears, and I could still hear it with my ears cut. And I grabbed that bow, and you know how the old cartoons used to be where if somebody was scared, their feet feet would move before their body and their body would go after their feet. Dude, it was like I was shot out of a cannon. I was running for my life. And as I'm running, this thing's still howling. I mean, it was huge. And when I got to the edge of that property, I dropped my bow and turned around, and it stopped and it echoed. Now, look, man, I'm not in Oregon. I'm not anywhere where there's any mountain range. But this thing echoed.
Yeah, no, I've heard all sorts of howls. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, it was kind of like that, but I was trying to think of something that it was close to, and the only thing I could come up with was it was like an air raid siren. It started out real low and went really loud and high. And it was kind of like a tornado siren down at a park. When it starts up, it's got that kind of growl, you know, real loud. It was loud. And I stood there and I'm like, you know what? If this is what I think it is, it's starting to get dark. I'm standing here. I'm gonna watch this thing walk out. I want to see it. I got enough guts up. I wanted to see it after going through this. And I never heard it. It never went out in the field. I never heard another step. It's like it just went silent. Nothing. And I mean nothing. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Because as loud as it was coming through the woods, it sounded like it was a giant. Every foot it put down, I could hear it clear back from the corner. Because when I first started hearing it, I popped my head to the right and I could hear it coming. And after it did the second one after me, that was it. I got my bow. I went in, up past the house. I threw all my stuff in the trunk. I got in my car. I didn't even spend the night, and I went home. Last year, I go out to get my stand ready because I have a stand in there also on the edge of the woods, down from where I was west. I was farther east, but my stand is in the west. So I go in there, I'm checking my trail cam and everything, and I look over, and there's this tree with this big branch, and it's just broke like a tree break. Now this branch it's got to be 11, 12 inches, and it's about 9 feet off the ground, and it's just broke and hanging like you would see a tree break, but it's like a supersized tree break. And then I go out of the deer trail past my stand, and there were 3 trees, okay? And they hung down in front of me. They had branches. And if a deer walked along the edge of the field, along the edge of the woods, I either had to shoot, I had a window to shoot on the left side of it if I was facing the field, and I had a window to shoot on the right side of it. I would have to wait for that deer to clear because all them branches were hanging down. So I go out there last year, and I walk out, and I didn't even notice it at first. I look up, and all the branches that were in my way were all broke. And they were broke like a tree break, or kind of broke and twisted. And one of them, it's like something grabbed a hold of it, broke it, and pulled down on it. And the bark of the tree went down, peeled it off the tree, and the tree limb's just hanging. Now, what windstorm's going to do that? And that was about 11 foot up, those branches. And they were all broke in front of my stand, almost like something was telling me, I don't want you hunting here. You know, I broke all these, and because my stand's directly behind them, right up on the edge of the woods. And I had pictures of them, and I sent them to a couple other people, and they were like, that's really fascinating. But I mean, I have found them. But like I said, I've seen tree breaks, 12 years ago. I saw tree breaks in Ohio running through a woods, but I didn't know what they were. And Bigfoot didn't connect with me that that's what they are, but I found a lot of them. Now, if I find one, I'm minding my surroundings. I'm really watching what's going on because, like I said, now I'm going back in the woods in the dark. So it's scary.
Scott, are these deciduous trees, like hardwood, or are they more of a fir type tree? I'm just curious. It doesn't make a difference, but I'm just curious.
Oh, they're hardwood. They're hardwood. And they're pretty thick trees. Like they're probably, I don't know, 24 inches around. They're pretty big trees. But I went out there and saw that, and I'm like, immediately I started looking for footprints because on the outside of the woods, it's kind of like a sandy dirt base. So if something walked across there, it would be perfect tracks because it would sink way in. But I couldn't find any footprints or anything. But it was really weird. I have trees all over my property, and when a windstorm comes through, it almost like spruces the trees or takes care of them. All the little branches fall out. They can't handle the hard, heavy winds, and they break off. But I don't see any big limbs crack or broke or hanging over or twisted. I've never seen a windstorm do that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I've seen, Will, you've seen plenty of that where you see a break and everything else around it is just fine. And I think anybody listening has gone out and seen what the streets look like and your backyard looks like after a windstorm. All the dead branches and the weak ones have been, like you said, they've been kind of pruned away, but it's not this very deliberate type of break that you see with the tree breaks.
Yeah, and the funny thing is we had this winter, we had like a rain snowstorm and freezing rain, and you know what that does to trees. You have snow load on trees that can't handle it, that are smaller, and they just bend over. And then as it starts to melt, they pop back up, most of them. And I got a lot of fern trees in the front of my house, and they were all bent over, but they didn't break. You know what I mean? And we had a windstorm with it, and they didn't break. This is something grabbing it with its hand and twisting and breaking it. It's not from a windstorm. Because most of the tree limbs I see from a windstorm are broke clean. They're just broke. They can't handle it, and they snap and break, and they fall down. But this isn't like this. So, those are the two experiences I had. Both of them were scary to me. And I went out to Vegas. Here, I sent you guys pictures. Did you guys get them?
Actually, I did not. I'll go back. Did you send them through email?
Yeah, I sent them through email. I went out to Vegas. It's my third time out there. I'm not a big gambler, but my girlfriend is, so she does a lot of gambling. But we try and do something different every time we go out there outside of gambling. First time, she just gambled. I hung out. I'm a musician, so I went and seen some bands, seen some entertainment. Second time, we did the sand rails in the desert, some stuff. So this time, she's like, I'm going to take you to Red Rock Canyon. And I'm like, what's Red Rock Canyon? She said, it's this big mountain range canyon, big, deep canyons. You can hike a little bit, and it's out, I think it's northwest or west of Vegas, about 25, 30 minutes. So we went out there, we paid the money, we went in there, and they got a 13-mile loop. And now, listen, I don't know, have you guys ever been there?
I have not, no.
Has Will?
I haven't, no.
Okay. So it's this mountain range that goes forever, and they're supposed to have wild donkeys out there and wild horses running around. I didn't see any of those, but they have signs up all over, don't feed the horses, all that. So we go, they got stations where they have, it's kind of like, what's the word I want? Kind of like a rest stop. And I think they got a place where you can go to the bathroom and you can take pictures. So we went to the first one, and it was a deep, deep crevice, and people were hiking down in it, and they looked real small. So it was pretty big. And this probably runs, I don't know how many hundreds of miles it runs. I don't know how many thousands of acres it is. So we go to the first one, and then it was a 20-mile-an-hour wind out there. And I dressed for 90-degree temperatures. I brought T-shirts and shorts. It didn't get out of the 60s, and it was in the 40s at night. So it totally blew my mind because, last time I was there, it was like 105 out there in the desert. So we get back in the car, and we skip a station, and we go to the third station. And we get out, and we take some panoramic pictures of all the mountain range and everything. It's really beautiful, and mountains forever. And we turn around and we go across, and I'm like, oh, hey, you can hike in here. let's go hike a little bit in here on the trail a little bit. So we park the car, and there's people coming out of the canyon area, and they're like, we're like, how far is this? So they're like, oh, it's not too far. It's just a small hike. So we go back in there, and once again, no Bigfoot on my mind. I'm just out there on vacation, having a good time. And I'm walking through the trails and the mesquite and cactus and all that stuff. And we're walking through, and we go over to the side of this rock, and there's a pyroglyphic on there. And we're like, oh my God, I'm taking pictures of it because I've never seen one for real in real life. And they got a little stand there, and it tells you about they don't know who did it or what Indian tribe or whatever. So we're looking at that, and I start to hear a voice. I start to hear a female voice and another voice. And I'm like, what the? There's nobody even around here. We're here by ourselves. And I started to get really like goosebumps and a little eerie about being there. And I was getting ready to tell my girlfriend, come on, let's go. And I look up, and there's a guy climbing. He's like climbing the side of the mountain or the cliff area. He's up in there 3/4 of the way, and he's got a guide line down to it must be his wife or his girlfriend, and she's holding on to it. And he's up there putting clamps in. And then I started taking pictures because I'm like, hey. And then I didn't hear anything. And then I look up and see him. I go, hey. And he goes, what? And I'm like, wow, man, I was just trying to get your attention because I didn't know you were climbing up there. It's kind of cool. We're kind of walking around and everything. And I'm like, you know what? I like to explore. When I go into a woods and I'm scouting the woods to hunt in the summer, whatever, I go through it. I mean, I want to know, where all the deer runs are, what way I think they're coming, where they've been here. I scout a lot. So I'm like, you know what? I've been here 3 years, but I probably won't ever get out here again, or it'll probably be a long time. So I start walking north, I think it is. And I start walking through the mesquite and everything. And I'm thinking, oh, it'd be really cool to see a rattlesnake or see a tarantula because I've never really seen one. I've seen snakes before, and I've seen big spiders, but never a tarantula or a desert tarantula. So I'm just walking through this, and I'm zigzagging. And my girlfriend's like, where are you going? And I just took my hand and kind of waved it. Like, shh, I want to see if there's any wildlife. So I walk probably 100 yards from her, maybe 125 yards. I don't know. It was pretty far distance. And all of a sudden I come to this clearing in the mesquite and everything. Like it was kind of open. There was some cactus and stuff, but it was mainly open. And I look over to my right, and there's a 2.5-foot rock stacking. And I look straight ahead of me. There's a 3-foot rock stacking. I look over to the left of me, and there's another 2-foot or 2.5-foot rock stacking. And I immediately went, and here's the other thing. It was real windy. I got down that canyon about 100 yards or so. There was no wind. It was like dead quiet, no wind, no nothing. Just went dead. And I'm like, I got to get my camera out. I started taking pictures of these things because I've never seen them before. I've never seen any kind of rock stacking or anything, right? And then, I found out that, people gift them and they'll rock stack or, there was a family in Tennessee that had some on their property, and they had several run-ins with them, and they broke into their canning place where they had canning jars and broke all their jars and ate their food, and they had scat in one area. I mean, you can look it up and see the pictures. And then they had a thing with these rocks stacked up on, almost like what I saw out there and pictures I sent you guys. One was real tall. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, don't even tell me that Sasquatch did this. Don't tell me that they're in here somewhere. And I can't, the undergrowth and everything is so tall that you have to walk around stuff because you can't see through it because it's so thick. And I'm thinking, is there one in here on his belly? I heard they crawl on their bellies. I heard they crawl like spiders. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm taking pictures. I'm backing out of here and getting out of here. So my girlfriend comes walking up, and I go, look at this. And she goes, what's that? I said, those are rock stackings. And Sasquatch does that a lot. And she's like, come on, man. Because I think now I told my wife in 2003, my soon-to-be ex-wife, about what happened, and I didn't tell anybody else. And I didn't tell anybody anything till after 2015 when I had this second experience. And then I started telling some of my friends. I told Colleen, she's like, I would never go in another woods again. Because we watch all kinds of things, documentaries and everything on TV, because I'm fascinated about it. Not that I want to walk in a woods and see something 10 foot staring at me. I told Tom it would be great to drive down a highway at 70 mile an hour and see one staying alongside the road. I'm good with that, but I don't know if I want one crawling up to me like a spider or, anything creepy like that, or smiling at me, or like other accounts I've heard from people. But I said, we need to back out of here and just go back to where we were and get out of here. So I said, you just try on a walk, and I'm going to walk backwards, and you be your eyes for me. I'm going to be my eyes for you. So in case anything happens, I can tell you to run. And she's like, oh, nothing's going to happen. I said, this is really creepy because there's no wind in here. There's nothing. So we got out, we got up the trail, we got up to our car, and then it was windy as you wouldn't believe. 20-mile-an-hour gusts blowing everywhere. And we just got in the car and we got out of there. So when we got back to the hotel.
Yeah, well, that's and just the kind of, it's almost like a monotone or, just sort of it's like an imitation of a whistle. So, well, listen, Scott, this is absolutely, you've had some really interesting encounters and some interesting situations. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. And I hope we stay in touch. And if you get any updates, by all means, please let us know.
Yeah, very interesting, Scott.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Oh, very interesting. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope you guys can find the pictures of the rock stackings that I sent you guys, because I sent them over on the email, Tom. I think it was directed towards you. So, but I took pretty good pictures of them. But it was really weird and eerie. There was no wind, and then all of a sudden, I find all these rock stackings. And the thing, and this is just my perspective. I know people hoax. I know there's probably been a lot of people that have hoaxed, but and this is just my opinion. If I was going to hoax something, I would do it where somebody's going to see it. I would not hoax it 200 yards off the beaten path where probably nobody's going to ever go. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So me seeing that, I just was like, this is not somebody hoaxing.
Well, that's it's a good point. I just checked my inbox. Maybe if you get a chance, I'd love to see them. So if you get an opportunity, send them again. You've got my email address, tom@creekdevil.com. Yep. And Will and I'd both like to see those.
Yeah, I have your phone number. I can probably try texting them to you.
No, that phone is a cheap phone.
Oh.
And it'll never make it through. Yeah, just send it by email. That'll work. The phone, I'm pretty sure, would not.
Okay, so send them to the Creek Devil one?
Yeah, absolutely. tom@creekdevil.com.
Okay, I will definitely get on that and do that. And thanks a lot for letting me come on and tell about what's happened to me. And it's very therapeutic for me. The funny thing, I've never had nightmares. I've never had nightmares about any of this, but it's still scary to go in at 4:00 in the morning in the dark, even with a flashlight, when you have something that sounds like it's 600 to 1,000 pounds running through the woods. And this thing was fast. I mean, it was on 2 feet and fast, like it was moving, but I knew it was taking big, giant strides because of the pause in between each one. I mean, it was moving, and that got my attention really quick.
I bet it did. Absolutely. Well, listen, thanks again, Scott. And I'll keep an eye out for those pictures. I really can't say how much I appreciate that. I really do.
Well, thank you guys for letting me come on, and you guys have a good night where you are, and be careful in the woods because a lot of people go missing. A lot of hunters go missing. You guys be careful out there because I know they're out there where you are.
You too. Well, obviously they're in your neck of the woods. Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Have a good weekend.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Take care, buddy. You met. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.